Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of The Late Sub. I am your host, Claire Watkins. It is Wednesday, May 28th. We are back. It is the international break, which that means you guessed it. US Women's National Team. We're going to be talking through this roster, the big names that stick out to me being in, the big names that stick out to me being out, the pairings I want to see on the pitch, and why I actually think that this international window is a bigger deal than maybe just a pat on the back for good league play. Let's jump in. So, as you all may have heard, it is the international break, and the U.S. Women's National Team is back for 2 international friendlies. The first will be against China. The second will be against Jamaica. One will be right at the end of May. Next one will be right at the beginning of June. We did not do kind of a live reaction to the 24-player roster, so we're going to do it right now. Not going to be too crazy in depth. You all kind of probably know the big names, gone through the list. But I do want to call out some of the things that I saw, especially with these games coming up. Talk a little bit about who's not on this roster, talk a little bit about who is on this roster, and maybe set the stakes, because I think a question that a lot of people always have for these games in the middle of the spring or in the club seasons running in the NWSL, club season just ended in Europe. What does it all mean? And I think what we're seeing is we're seeing some players get rewarded for strong league play. And we're also seeing some players maybe get the first of only a couple tryouts. So with the U.S., yes, the stakes are maybe a little bit lighter, but also always pretty serious. But I want to talk about first some of the players we did not see on this roster list, because not only does it speak to maybe what head coach Emma Hayes thinks of these players themselves, but also we're seeing the implementation of this system where the U23s are kind of being used like the minor leagues, this youth team, U23 youth team, for players that she thinks needs a little bit more development or need to be in a different training situation or have different leadership structures on the team. And so, not to use like the most American of metaphors, but I do think we're seeing some players get back sent down to the minors. We're seeing some players get like called up to the majors. And I think what players are in or are out, yes, it's just one camp, but all of these are a nice snapshot into maybe what Hayes is thinking for where these players are at this moment. So let's start with the players not on the senior team roster that stick out to me. I think we have to talk about Corbin Albert, not on the senior team roster. She's going to be playing with the U23s in this camp. Jaden Shaw is not with the senior team. She's with the U23s. Mia Fischel is being brought back in with the U23s, maybe a little bit of a different situation coming off injury. And then there is one player who is simply just kind of like out because she no longer qualifies for the U23s, which is goalkeeper Jane Campbell. So let's start with Corbin Albert. I don't know if I like this, to be completely honest. It's kind of, I'm struggling with this cognitive dissonance. And it's wild to me that someone who started the Olympic gold medal match for the United States Women's National Team is now playing for the U23s when the senior team is in session. I think we're stuck in this, is she or is she not? Is she good enough for the senior team? Is she not good enough for the senior team? That's an incredible wealth of international experience to be bringing to a youth team. At some point, I do just wonder, with the amount of years that Albert has been playing as a professional at this point, does Hayes just need to make a call here? It seems like she can't make the one that she wants, where I think she would like Albert to be on the senior team, but Albert isn't giving her those all-around performances that kind of validate that roster spot when there are other players that could be given a look. I understand that Albert is young. I get that she also has some really nice elements of positive play versus certain opponents, but to me, putting her on the U23s doesn't feel like a stash move to let other players shine. It's a demotion. It would be one thing. I mean, like Shaw, like the shades for Shaw are slightly different because of her role with the senior team thus far. Albert started the Olympic gold medal match in the midfield, and now she's kind of getting put into this lower level. It's a demotion from her heights as a player on the national team. And I think it's kind of crazy. And I would just maybe like to see Emma Hayes rip this Band-Aid off either way. Stick with her on the senior team, if that's what you truly believe, or let her develop with her club. It's okay. I mean, like, it's fine for a young player to continue to grow and develop. I mean, there have been rumors that Albert might actually want out at PSG because they've kind of fallen off the mark in France. They haven't seen the same Champions League success that they've seen in the past. It's possible that she's actually looking for a new club environment. I think that would be great. Maybe they're looking to see her show some leadership with the young ones, where maybe she's let the moment get a little bit too big for her with the senior team. But I want to be reaching the end of the line with sort of these wishy-washy call-ups for a player like this. Like, is she starting quality? for the biggest match of a major tournament? Or does she need more development with the U23s? Or does she need more development with her club? I just don't understand the messaging on Albert. I don't understand what either Hayes is seeing or not seeing to either not give her that senior call up all the way, or just say, listen, we've seen other players deal with this. Jenna Neiswanger, she's a player that's not on these rosters at all, right? Like, just give someone some time with their club. So the Albert thing perplexes me, and it really does feel like Hayes, like, really planting the flag on this U23 thing being like really important, and it's going to fix these players and make them better for the senior team. But is she in or is she out? I just want to know, I don't care either way, I guess. Just tell me. And so I'm losing my patience a little bit with the Corbin Albert experiment, just because it feels like it is so all over the place. I will say I have a little bit of a different stance on Jaden Shaw. Not in that I think that she shouldn't be with the U23s, but it's in fact I think that she should. Shaw is troublesome to me in that I need the courage. She's with the courage for this first season in her career after transferring over from San Diego. I need them to figure their offense out, because Shaw has skills to give to both club and country, but her next step as a pro, again, young player, you're not on the U23s if you're not a young player, right? But her next step as a pro hasn't been as clear as I think everyone wanted or hoped. I worried that Shaw is like getting shuffled around a little bit in a North Carolina team that's figuring out how to score. And I actually think their hyper possessive style that isn't always going towards goal has compounded her less efficient tendencies rather than helping them. It seemed like a good like system fit for her as a player, but now I'm like, is it too good of a system fit? Does she need more clarity? And speaking of clarity, I sometimes wonder what the U.S. wants from Shaw. Is she a running towards goal shooter? Is she sort of this inside wing or outside wing, sort of inside versatile player who can do overlapping runs inside outside? Is she an attacking midfielder? Is she a back to goal false nine? I'm worried that without being given a chance to specialize, because she is so versatile and is so talented, she's getting kind of lost in the sauce a little bit. And so I worry about that for Shaw, for club. I worry about that for Shaw, for country. And I do think she has a chance to kind of lead this team. She does sort of have that Olympic experience, but as we know, she was not as integral to that team as Albert was, for example, due to injury. I worry that increasingly she's getting a little bit mismanaged, and I'd hate for that growth window to close. So I agree with Shaw not being on that senior team roster. There aren't complaints for me from that. But it's kind of similar to Albert. I worry that a lot of this stems from the club environment. And I worry that we're starting to see a really, really promising player slip lower and lower on the depth chart because her versatility is being relied on too much, as opposed to her ability to specialize. Now, the other two, Mia Fischel, a name really actually welcome to see on the U23s. She's coming back from injury, which is, as we, again, using the metaphor, a great use of the minor leagues. She's actually the kind of center forward that the U.S. could really use right now. A result puncher, good on set pieces, that she's got a nose for goal that like not every attacker on the U.S. has right now, especially with Triple Espresso out. And I'm hopeful that she's going to be able to continue to develop her way back into the fold. Again, that's a great use of the U23s. Good stabilizing force for that youth team, but also feels like a unique case of the U.S. getting an eye on a rehabbing player without just bringing her into senior camp as a training player. Good use. I like that. I like having Fischel there. And then the last player I just want to give a quick shout out to is actually Jane Campbell, is the player truly out in the cold here, it seems like. Dropped by the senior team without any recourse on the youth levels. Campbell is 30. She's been around for a while. She's having not her greatest statistical year, actually, after a couple of years playing quite well. She is giving this vibe of sort of this always the bridesmaid, never the bride of the U.S. goalkeeper cycle. That does happen to people. She's not the only one. Like, she shouldn't feel bad. You got Casey Murphy, who's on the outside looking in, Aubrey Kingsbury, who's on the outside looking in. Hayes is really cycling through a lot of different goalkeeper talent, and I think being a known property is not always actually beneficial. So I worry for Campbell that this might be the end of the road, but it's hard to say because there is such an untested trio in the senior camp right now. So very interested to see how she's going to be able to develop with her club. Not develop, but maybe just get her form back with her club and maybe be able to get back in that picture. So who reaped the benefits kind of this moving around, right? Some players moving back down, needing more time. That's exactly what Hayes said the 23s were going to be used for. And so here are the names that are on the senior team roster that stick out to me and what opportunities I think they're going to have to stick around, because all of these players are coming in not thinking this is going to be a one and done. They don't want it to be a one and done. We might say, oh, how nice, they got their U.S. Women's National Team call up. And they're like, wait, I want to be on the U.S. Women's National Team forever. So names that stick out to me are Claudia Dickey, Carrie Abello, Lola Bonta, Olivia Moultrie, and Gisele Thompson. So let's dig into kind of why they're here and their odds of kind of sticking around for this U.S. Women's National Team senior team. Claudia Dickey. This is absolutely league reward. She is statistically one of the highest performing goalkeepers in the NWSL this season. She plays for the Reign. She is on my midway-ish NWSL Goalkeeper of the Year shortlist for sure. The numbers do not lie. She is one of the best pure shot stoppers in the league this year, if not the best. My question with Dickey is her decision making. Really hard to tell, which of those two tendencies is going to come back to earth. Either the decision making will rise to the shot stopping, or the shot stopping will maybe fall back down to some of the decision making numbers. But I will say this: I like Claudia Dickey the same way I like Mandy McGlynn, who is also on this roster. I'm not sure you need both. They're very similar players. They're incredibly naturally talented, and sometimes the mental part of the game, the mental resolve, is the hard part. And that does make me wonder a little bit if Fallon Tullis-Joyce is like kind of pushing towards that number one in the pecking order moment for goalkeeper, because these are two very similar players, McGlynn and Dickey here getting her chance. And then you have Tullis-Joyce, who I think has a very different reputation as a player. So fascinated with what this means. I like Dickey's chances of showing off in training, but it is that extra element of like, what does it look when it comes to crunch time? Carrie Abello, another league reward, absolutely very strong choice, coming off an incredible season with the Orlando Pride, as we know, who won everything last year. She's only 25, great age to be if you're trying to, break into the U.S. Women's National Team senior team. She fills a clear need, and she's very versatile, and they love that in defenders. She can play in a 3-back, 4-back. She can play outside. She can play inside. She is a player that they are always trying to find that like Swiss Army knife defender in the realm of like what Casey Kruger was able to do for the team or what Emily Sonnet is able to do for the team. They need players, Davidson can do for the team. They really love these players that can play outside in the 3-back, or they can slot into center back if they need to, or they can play kind of this run and gun outside back style. Abello can do all of those things. And that is why I think she's getting a look here. And also just because she's been very, very good in the league. You do kind of feel though, for Kylie Nadner, which formerly Kylie Strom, who is Abello's Orlando teammate, who similarly has been very, very good. And they are looking for center backs for the U.S., but she's a little bit older. She's 33. And we're going to talk about that concept of like what age players are getting looks and kind of what that means. But I think Abello is a great league pull. Would love to see how she does in camp. I think you can put her in that realm of like Anderson, Sams, Mickey Owen, those players that can do it, but can they do it at this level? And I think their window to impress is kind of short. I don't think Hayes is going to be going into a major tournament wanting just on league form. That was kind of the experiment of the 2023 World Cup. It didn't go that well. I think Hayes is going to have her favorites and she's going to have her players in her system that she likes. But there is room for some of these players. And Abello is as good a shot as I think any of those other names that I mentioned. Which leads me to Lo LaBonta, the headline of the camp, right? But I think that LaBonta in this camp, it's a little bit deeper than just being like, oh, how nice this player is finally being rewarded for her incredible work in the league. She's been very, very good for Kansas City, as we know. Again, she has that versatility. She's been able to slot into all three midfield roles with a lot of awareness, spatial awareness. Her again, the mental side is really, really strong. She's a great PK taker, not for nothing. Wonderful locker room presence. And she also just like has been around for a long time. She is a professional soccer lifer, and she has that mentality that has carried the U.S. Women's National Team for years. But this is like the other kind of thing that's bugging me, similar to the Corbin Albert question, which is like, are these players in or are they out? If you're over the age of 32, are you in or out? We saw Casey Kruger, who won the Olympic gold with the U.S. She's the outside back for the Washington Spirit, talk about how she feels like she had been, the door had closed for the U.S. Women's National Team because of her age. And now you have LaBonta coming in. Similar thing. She's playing incredibly well, but we're having Hayes kind of talk on both sides about what she wants for 2027. Does she want this fully revamped team? Is she learning that you need a little bit of both? Because that has always been really true for the U.S. I will say I love the LaBonta call-up. I think she's going to make it hard to drop. She's going to make herself hard to drop. I wish it had come 5 years ago, though. And as happy as I am that it's happening now, I just don't totally understand the internal logic of age with 2027 2 years away. So I'm not betting against Lola Bonta. She's going into this camp, like I said, she's going into this camp looking for more call-ups. This is not just like a job well done situation for her. But so much of it relies on Hayes's internal logic and the leadership structure that she wants in her locker room that it does kind of take it out of the players' hands. So I'm really excited. I hope LaBonta gets some, like, she should start. I mean, honestly, Lola Bonta should start like at least one of these games. I want to see it. I think she would crush. So I'm really excited to see what she can do out there. Similarly with Olivia Moultrie, she's maybe again on this opposite side of the Corbin Albert dichotomy is what I guess we'll call it. She was this next gen player, got completely left behind last year in the U.S.'s search for gold in the Olympics. Maybe less versatile than we'd hoped, has kind of had to find her way with all of the coaching changes in Portland. Her growing steady play in Portland is probably why she's back on this team. Again, you look at the stats, she's playing very, very well for Portland. She's connecting well with Sam Coffey, who, as we know, is kind of this mainstay for the U.S. right now. Welcome return. Find it interesting that she's popped all the way back up to the senior team, right? It's like that seems like a player that you think might have been reintroduced with the U23s. Maybe they think she's ready to jump back in. I'd love to see her elevate her game in this camp. That is like, I think the senior team call up is a league reward. She's been very good for Portland, but she is old enough now that the pressure is kind of on. She needs to make herself stick. Her peers are playing really, really well. There are more even younger players playing in the NWSL who are playing as well as Moultrie, if not better, and they are still working their way up in the youth teams. So what can Moultrie do with this senior team call up to set herself apart, especially on a roster, and we'll talk about this in a second, very heavy on these kind of connecting passing style midfield players, which I actually think is great. I actually think the balance of this midfield is really interesting. And then this is sort of a catch-all bucket at the end. I say Gisele Thompson, similarly, really excited to see her get the senior team call up as opposed to just get put in with the youth team. I think it's interesting that she's listed as a forward. She's known as a defender, maybe an indicator that it's going to be very attacking on the wings during this international break. But she is similar to, you look at any of these other senior team call-ups of these young players, Michelle Cooper, Claire Hutton, Ali Sentner, etc. They're here because they're playing too well for the U23s. They've been put into senior team camp and they've swum. They have not sunk. And I think that there isn't a lot of pressure on this group to perform all the way right away, but they need to keep growing, keep stepping up in the senior team environment and as much as they can contribute to the results because there are stakes to these games. I think, again, you don't want to overlook this window. China is going to present a very different approach than Jamaica. The way, what I've whittled it down to is that China is very physical. Jamaica is very compact. The U.S. is going to get physically and mentally tested. These are not going to probably be super high-scoring games. The U.S. would love for them to be, but if the other teams have their way, the experimentation is still on, but these could be short tryouts, especially if the U.S. doesn't kind of show up and show out the way that they're expected to. They're going to be asked to be pushed off, to not be pushed off the ball in the midfield. They're going to be asked to make creative decisions that still prioritize taking care of the ball. They're going to have to break down a low block. And these are tests that the U.S. in the recent history haven't always passed. And especially in the light of not getting She Believes one this year, I do wonder if this is when the testing ground, they're going to start asking players to show their work. And I find that very interesting as well. Hopefully these games will be fun, but the other team on the pitch is going to try to make them not fun. And so I think that what we're going to see is these young players be very tested mentally. And then again, I think with China in particular, they're a very physical team. I think they're going to be asked to really show up physically as well. So here are some of the pairings I want to see kind of to close what I want to see for these games. We'll see what happened next week. We'll talk about both games next week. I want to see a good mixture of some of these new center backs with Naomi Girma. Naomi Girma is back in the mix, coming back from injury. They need to figure out, again, just another partner for her that will work. Tierna Davidson, unfortunately, suffered that season-ending injury earlier this year, so they need to find someone next to Girma. They're going to see kind of how these players play off her. I think Sams, Mickey Owen, a couple of these players, I think, could really step up and do a nice job with her, depending also on the player that they have behind them in goal. I just want to see a few newer faces next to, as we know, like the mainstay, future captain, leader, elite of the U.S. Women's National Team. I'm also excited to see some of these midfield trios. I think they're going to prioritize the number 8, which, as we always talk about, is the role that the U.S. is missing. And I think that we're going to see a lot of auditions for that this week. I want to see Coffey and Moultrie maybe get a chance to use that club connection. Hutton and Moultrie, or Hutton and Johannes, Coffey and Johannes. This isn't going to be a particularly attacking midfield. I think we might see Lindsay Heaps as the number 10. Get ready, everybody. But I do think that the idea is that it's going to be a progressive stance, progress and value the ball, which is what we want to see the U.S. Women's National Team midfield continue to do, especially against, like, yes, physical midfield or a low block. I like that. I think they're prioritizing a huge weakness for the team against the right opponent. Curious to see who's going to step up, who's going to look good, who's going to be able to make those progressive passes while also making those recovery runs, and then utilize the speed in the front. This is a nicely speedy forward core. These are good shooters up top. It should be a fun team, hopefully, if they're able to get a little bit of space, utilize Gisele Thompson's form. Lynn Biondolo's the veteran presence now, which is really exciting. Sentner, Cooper's physicality, a lot of really good attacking pieces here. But you want to set up that connective midfield, get those progressive passes to the wings, let them cook, but don't resort to long ball over the back line. So just like some of the basic stuff that we always want to see from the U.S. Women's National Team. And that's kind of my final thought. These games are experiments, and this is still an experimental roster. But sometimes those can be the trap games, and we do not always see the U.S. execute. They might look rusty. They might look like they haven't seen each other in a while. They might look like they're really nervous because this is their first chance. But they're expected to win, and they're kind of expected to win these big. And the other team is going to do everything they possibly can to make those players look bad. So who's going to be able to elevate their game, even if they don't have a ton of experience? It's up to the senior call-ups to make those players that are in the 23s harder to call back in. And those players in the 23s are going to probably have to show new sides of themselves to get back into the fold. This is the system. This is the Emma Hayes system. And I cannot wait to say who says, nope, this is not just a pat on the back. You're not dropping me. So exciting times and excited to see the games. The Late Sub is part of the Just Women's Sports Network. This show is written by Claire Watkins and produced and edited by Parker Fenton. To get more of your favorite women's sports content, subscribe to the Just Women's Sports newsletter and follow Just Women's Sports across all your favorite channels.